Hi there, this is Jonathan Ginsberg. I'm a Social Security disability attorney, and today I'd like to talk to you about trick questions that you may get from your Social Security judge. Now, if you remember, a few months ago I did a video entitled How to Avoid Trick Questions from the Social Security Judge, and that got a lot of people looked at it, and I got a lot of questions out of that. And that video actually was really more about basically showing you or demonstrating to you that judges typically ask questions or a series of questions that they know the answer to. And what they're really trying to look for is whether or not you are a credible witness, whether you can be believed. And so I gave an example there of a case where I had a client who was testifying in a hearing, and the judge asked him, "Do you smoke cigarettes?" And my client originally said, "No, I do not," but the record showed evidence that in fact he did, and over the course of the hearing, the next couple of minutes, my client eventually acknowledged that yes, he did occasionally smoke, maybe as many as a pack as a carton or two a year, which is a far cry from not smoking at all. And that was an example of how you have to be really careful, because judges, again, will ask you questions they know the answer to. So I've been asked to give some more examples of how this works, and I want you to sort of understand the theme that I'm getting at, and that is, number one, you want to avoid absolutes. I never do this. I always do that. You want to avoid that because it's rare that somebody really never does something. I mean, do you drink? I do not. I never drink. Well, have you ever had a glass of wine? Well, yeah, I had a glass of wine 6 months ago, or I had a beer on the 4th of July. So that's a big difference between I never drink, and in your mind you really may never drink, and very, very occasionally you may have a beer. And again, it's not a problem that you have a beer or a glass of wine, but sometimes people get really caught up in telling judges what they think the judge wants to hear. And it's much more beneficial to you to tell the truth. So you want to avoid absolutes. And also I want to point out that a lot of times some of this information is in the medical record, which means that you've told it to your doctor, that the judge will already know an answer, and he'll catch you. And the second part of this, of course, is that the reason the judge is asking you these kind of questions is he's evaluating your credibility. Credibility or believability is a big, big part of a Social Security disability hearing. And when I look at denial notices, when my hearings are denied, which thankfully is not very often, but it does happen, one of the reasons the judge denies the case is he or she will say, "I did not find this claimant credible." Now, of course, the medical evidence is the most important factor, but there are enough cases that are kind of right on the edge where the medical evidence shows that their person has a serious back problem or a mental health issue. And really the question is, should the judge believe the claimant in saying that I have this incredible level of pain and limitation of movement, even though it may be a bulging disc instead of a herniated disc? And so, the judge has to figure out whether you can be believed. And one of the ways that the judge does this is to ask you questions to see how you respond. And some of the questions that the judge might use to get to this are as follows. Question: are you responsible for taking care of your children? Well, if you answer no, then the next question the judge may ask you is there somebody else in your house that does? Well, if you're a single parent and you've got kids that are 6 or 7 years old, the judge is going to have a hard time believing that a 7-year-old gets himself up in the morning, gets dressed, fixes himself breakfast, gets ready for the bus, goes out unattended, and waits for the bus. Probably you're going to do something to help that child. So that's an example of where you don't want to say, "I don't do anything," but you can talk about the limited things that you do. Do you help with homework? Is another question that the judge may ask. Again, most children, even through high school, are going to need a little bit of help with homework. And if you say, "I don't do anything to help my kids," but in fact you help your kids with homework, you may be perceived as being not entirely truthful. Do you attend school functions or athletic events, games, things like that? Again, that's just an example of something that you go to that is not that's not nothing, it's something, and it does show that you're making an effort and you're able to do certain activities, even though you say, "Well, my back really hurts badly and I can't sit for more than 10 or 15 minutes, but I'm able to go watch my kid play football or a wrestling match." You want to be truthful, and really this is, again, you want to prepare with your attorney, but you want to stay away from absolutes like, "I don't do anything to help take care of my kid." And unless your child is really unusual and has absolutely completely independent on everything, it's going to be very difficult to convince a judge that you do absolutely nothing to take care of your kid. Second question the judge may ask: do you do any cooking? And again, sometimes people really don't do any cooking, but that also includes using a microwave, making a sandwich, heating up some soup. That's considered cooking. So if you say, I don't do any cooking at all, but then the judge says, well, do you make yourself a sandwich or do you heat up soup? Then again, it's not entirely truthful to say, I do no cooking. So again, if to answer that question would be, I don't do any serious cooking that takes more than 5 or 10 minutes. I use the microwave. I may make myself a sandwich, heat up some soup, maybe make some scrambled eggs. That's about the extent of it. And the reason for that, Judge, is after about 5 to 7 minutes, the pain in my back gets so severe that I have to sit down. And it's very difficult to cook when you're sitting down. And I really try to make it very, very brief when I'm at the stove at all. Or my memory has gotten so bad, or I get so flustered that I leave the stove on, so my family does not let me near the stove at all. That would be another answer. So, you want to talk about that I've tried to do this, but try to stay away from the absolutes. Do you drive? And this is one I see a lot. Do you drive a car? Now, that's not the same as saying, do you have a license or do you have a car? Do you have the capacity to drive a car? And if you say, no, I don't, the next question may be, have you taken any trips any place within the last year or so? Okay, I have not taken any trips, or I have. Did you sit for more than 15 or 20 minutes? Did you have to take breaks? Things like that. How do you get your medicines? How do you get your groceries? These are all things that you may need to explain. Even if you don't have a license, sometimes people get concerned because they don't have a license, but they're driving anyway. Social Security judges are not going to report you to the DMV. So if you drive a car, even if you don't have a license, and you do it only occasionally, you need to reveal that and be truthful. So stay away from absolutes unless really since the time of your alleged onset, you have not driven a car, you've not been behind the wheel at all. But if you have been even once, you need to explain that to the judge and let him know, because like I said before, these things tend to find their way into your medical record. Well, you may not even remember telling the doctor, but they're there, and the judge can use that to say, hey, this person's not entirely credible. Do you use a cane or other assistive device? And what the judge is really looking for are situations where that's been prescribed. If you use somebody else's cane or assistive device, then tell the judge that. Of course, the follow-up will be to use that person's medicines as well. The judge wants to know, why are you using a cane? Is it something, and how often do you use it? If you say, I use it all the time, do you have it with you today here in the hearing? Or does that just mean around the house? You want to be real specific, practice with your attorney, but you need to be able to explain very clearly, if you use an assistive device, where it came from, what it is, how often you use it, and why you really need it. And again, if you don't use one, but you need to be absolutely certain that you don't, if you've never used one at all since your alleged onset, that's fine. But if you've even once or twice, you need to say that you have, and don't exaggerate, say I use it all the time, but you don't have it with you today at your hearing. And the final kind of trick question, I guess, would be, how long can you sit? Trick part of it, number one, is if you say I can only sit for 15 minutes, don't sit at your hearing for an hour and not get up. It's okay to stand up and move around at your hearing as long as you stay near the microphone. But don't say I can sit for 15 minutes and then sit there for an hour. This is another time where you'll get the question, have you traveled any place more than 50 or 60 miles from your house in the last 2 years? If you have, how did you handle that? Was it an airplane? How did you sit? Did you sit on the aisle? What did you do? Is it a bus trip? How did you deal with that sort of thing? If it's a car trip, did you stop? And again, don't expect the judge to ask you about those accommodations. You need to explain to him. Yes, I rode in a car. After 20 minutes, I had to. The driver had to stop, and I had to get up and walk around. This repeated itself 2 or 3 times an hour. And you may need to be prepared to have a statement from the driver attesting to that. Because again, a judge may not believe that someone would drive with you and stop every 20 minutes. So just realize that judges are asking questions not just to get information, but to see how you answer it, and also to see if you're believable. So depending on your impairment, these are the sort of things that you and your attorney need to practice so that you know how to answer these questions appropriately. And again, avoid the absolutes, the always, the nevers, things like that, and realize that a lot of this information may be in your medical record and you may not even realize it. So don't try to tell the judge what you think he or she wants to hear. Tell him what the truth is, what actually the situation is. So hope this has been helpful. If you did find it helpful, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel, like it on Facebook, connect with us there as well. If you have any suggestions for future videos or questions, let me know that. I'm happy to try to work those in. So for now, this is Jonathan Ginsberg. Thanks very much.